You're listening to Online Pet Health Podcasts with Dr. Megan Kelly. Continuing education for veterinarian rehabilitation therapists. Learn more at onlinepethealth.com.
Hey Vet Rehabbers, it's one of my Vet Rehab Practice podcasts today with Jen Repac from the University of Florida's Integrative Medicine Department. Now, one of the things I love about these interviews is that Vet Rehabbers share with us their wins and their losses. And although it's not great that they made mistakes, when they share them with us, we get to learn from them. So when we find ourselves in the same position, we have hindsight which we would never have had before. So you get to fast track your success by not repeating the same mistakes that other vet rehabbers made. Now, we recorded this podcast in the lead up to Vet Rehab Summit. As an avid researcher and academic, Jen and I chat about the research discussion room. If any of you would like to be a part of this global working group, please you can email us at info@onlinepethealth. Jen also presented a lecture at the Vet Rehab Summit about thermography in living color, thermography and research and your practice, where she focuses on her research, what we do and don't know about the modality, and how to use it well in your practice. We also chat about one of her hobbies, which is crafting. So every dog needs a job and every person needs a craft. Check out Jen's website at drglittersparkle.com to see the crafts she has been up to. Over to Jen. Hey Jen, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Jen, for our listeners, won't you tell them a little bit about yourself and how you got into the field of vet rehab?
So currently, I just finished my 3-year residency, and actually before that, a specialty internship at AMC, and I'm in transition, going to be assistant clinical professor at the University of Florida in the Integrative Medicine Department. And I got into rehab as kind of in a roundabout way. I graduated from vet school over 10 years ago and started with acupuncture. And then through my acupuncture friends, I noticed that a lot of my acupuncture friends were into rehab, and kind of started doing a little bit of my own research in that area to try to figure out what it was about, and realized it had a wealth of opportunity, just like I'm sure this whole audience understands. And so, and then from there, I decided that I wanted to be part of an academic program. And so that's what led me on this path.
So have you always been very academic? Because obviously now, you know, you've made the residency, now you've made the move to a university. So has that been your sort of the track that you thought you were going to take from when you started vet school?
Definitely not. When I started vet school, I was interested in everything. And then I graduated from vet school and I was interested in so many things. And so I actually did general practice for a number of years. I did some shelter work. I traveled to China and did some teaching in a learning exchange program at a general practice hospital for international clientele. And from there, I realized how much I really love teaching. I love traveling. I love education. And so then that kind of got me thinking that I needed to get back into that. And so this was my path in there.
And so tell us a bit about the residency and what that entails.
So the residency program for rehab is a 3-year program. For me, I started off with a specialty internship beforehand, and that was important to me because I was brand new to rehab and I didn't really understand what it was about, and I was also a stranger to academia as well. So I think that was nice to have as kind of a little, segue into there. I also never did a rotating internship, and so it also kind of like helped me familiarize me with that kind of environment. But it's not necessary, and you can either do a rotating internship beforehand, or you could do practice experience also would be a reasonable path before doing a residency at this point. So it's a 3-year program, and requires a research project, which actually just got published, my first research paper, and I'm working on some others. So that's really exciting. And then the boards actually are not for another 6 months. So hopefully that will go, and then I'll be board certified after that program. But that path has made me eligible to do more educational opportunities. So like holding my current position at University of Florida.
Congratulations on the publication of your research. Do you want to tell us a little about your research project?
Sure. So my research project was using thermography to look at changes in hind limb musculature, changes in temperature and hind limb musculature in dogs during a 6-minute walk. So nothing super exciting in terms of activity wise, but there's growing interest in the area of thermography in veterinary medicine, but there's a lot of need for baseline information. And I just wanted to know, do the biceps femoris or do the gracilis muscles change in temperature? What can we expect for just a very small amount of activity? And so what we found was there were changes depending on how you measure them. And so I'm actually going to be giving a follow-up lecture through Online Pet Health at the summit this fall about that.
Yeah, awesome. We look forward to it. And then the residency work-wise, what did it entail? Were you basically working there? Did you have long hours?
Yeah, residency programs, I'll say, it's hard to say across the board what they all are, especially in a baby program. Like this program just started a few years ago, and it has so many different interpretations in what that program can be like. And I've been fortunate enough to have communication with other residents in other parts of the states, and we've talked about our experiences, and it's just so drastically different. But in general, we all work really hard. We're treating patients, we're seeing cases, but the type of cases that you see and the type of work that you're doing is largely dependent on your mentor's background and their perspective. And so there are many residents that, for example, are working for somebody who is double boarded in either surgery, maybe they were a surgeon first and then became boarded in sports medicine rehab. And so their focus is going to have that surgical slant. Or some that are working for somebody like Dr. Schmalberg out at the University of Florida is nutrition, and I think he was first nutrition, then sports medicine and rehab. And so a lot of their influence is going to be nutrition, which I'm looking forward to having that perspective too, because I've never worked with a nutritionist. And so I think what's unique about the program I did with Dr. Alvarez is that's her one thing. Her one thing is sports medicine and rehab. And she has a past life in emergency medicine, but she is 100% dedicated to that. So it's really nice in the sense that, she has that perspective where that's 100% of her focus. She's not in doing surgeries or anything like that on the side. And she's just so incredibly passionate about rehabilitation in particular. And I can also say that there still is a non-traditional residency track. So what that means is that you have full-time practitioners that are rehab certified just with the CCRT or CCRP, who are doing all of it's like an independent study residency coursework, trying to get their research published and working remotely with a mentor. And so that's still happening too. I don't know when they're going to close the window for that, but that type of program, you end up in the same place. It's just a different way of doing it.
Yeah. Does it take longer to do it?
Usually yes, because it's hard when, we're both working full time, but many of practitioners are just, it's just so hard to make the time to do the studying. And also, if you're not in that academic environment, I imagine it would be very hard to discipline yourself, and also just to keep it on your radar. And so I think for me, I'm glad that I did that. I don't think I would have gotten as far if I had to rely on myself to do this on my own, especially since I just, I didn't know very much about it coming in. So yeah, I would highly recommend doing this program. I think what's important too, though, is especially now when we have two different levels of certification. We have the certification, which most of the viewers here probably have, which is just a few months, which enables you to be a rehab therapist and do all the things. And then you have board certification, which is just it is a lot of work. And I think that I wouldn't say that monetary goals would be in line with making that decision. I think it really has to do with what do you want to do with rehab. And for me, what was really important is contributing to the rehab field and continue to contribute to the rehab field as a whole, and teach veterinarians and do research. And that's just, it's not super practical in a private practice setting, is what I realized.
Yeah. And if you compare when you practiced doing normal veterinary compared to doing a residency at the Animal Medical Center, being a nonprofit, is it very different in the way that the setup is and the work environment?
I mean, it's definitely very different. So the pace, the AMC is supposed to be a hybrid of private practice and academia. Academia being really, really slow and private practice being super, super fast paced. And I guess that's true. It is true. But to me also, it seems like in some ways it still goes more slowly in some ways, in terms of there's a lot more paperwork involved. You're much more thorough about your cases. You have time to be more thorough. You can pay a lot more attention to each individual patient, which is nice. You get to really delve into things in a much more profound level. I also found that, and I never worked as a private practitioner in rehab, just to kind of put that on the aside, but I never had as much of like a long enduring relationships with each of my patients in the same way as when I was in general practice. I
think that's the same in private practice for vet rehab. So like if I compare when I was a vet doing normal veterinary, it's so quick, you have like 15-20 minute consults and they're booked. Whereas with vet rehab, we get to spend a little bit more time with our patients and with the owners, and you build,
and there's a lot of repeat.
And very different relationships with them. And you see them on quite a regular basis, whereas maybe in veterinary, you'll see them and then you'll see them 10 days later for a checkup. And then that's it. You might see them again, or they might see another vet, but you tend to see your patients more regularly. And I must say, I love that about vet rehab in comparison to vet. I love those relationships that I built with my patients as well as my clients.
It's kind of fun because usually you can walk into a room and you can recognize all the patients that are in the room. And if you don't recognize one of them, you're like, who's that? It's a new patient. So
and
nice.
When you were doing your residency, you're obviously having to learn so much, and literally go through every single research paper that is available in vet rehab. Were you just working day and night, or did you manage to get some time off?
Well, there's a lot of, I think that's a big adjustment for somebody who's used to working. We all work hard as veterinarians, but then to work 50, 60 hours a week, and then have to go home and to discipline yourself to do more work, and to study, to keep up with reading the textbooks and reading, the literature. That is a huge adjustment. And sad to say, I'm going to be continuing doing that probably at a much higher pace through next March for my boards. It does take a lot of discipline. It is very, very hard to do. And I still struggle with it because the board exam covers just so much material.
And tell me, when you were working at the Animal Medical Center, what was the biggest challenges that you found working there?
Biggest challenges, I think that, and maybe specific to that institution, is I think that we were a little bit separated from the rest of the departments, like physically. So we're kind of, and I imagine just because rehab takes a lot of space and all this stuff, it's probably pretty common for multi-specialty practices to be physically separated. But it wasn't until I did my rotations in the other departments where I had to rotate 6 weeks on surgery and neurology and radiology, where I got to really know the other departments. Because when you're working in a multi-specialty hospital, you need to have that communication between the different departments to make things easier for yourself. You do depend on each other, and that's one of the wonderful things about specialty practice is that you have all that support. It's just being able to communicate with them. AMC is actually 8th floor specialty hospital, and we're on number 8, and everybody else is for the most part on 2. But yeah, I mean, that eventually, as I got to know people over time, it became a little bit easier. And one of the things that I, just to kind of segue into why I did this too, that I realized was important, and throughout the years, we've tried different things, whether we have rotating interns come in our department, meaning that they rotate a few weeks with us, go down to the other departments and so on, versus had one intern the whole year. And we tried all these different ways. And as difficult as it is to teach a brand new person every 3 to 4 weeks, it changed everything in terms of the way our relationships with the rest of the hospital and the rest of the specialties. And so we decided in the end that it was most important to keep those newbies coming in, because most young veterinarians still, when they graduate from school, they don't know much about rehab. And no matter what they want to do, it's just important for them to know what it is, and to know what it is that we do.
So you qualified in 2009, right?
Yes, as a graduated, yeah.
And so how much veterinary rehabilitation did you do at vet school? How much did you learn there? So
we had a rehab department, and I remember it as being, again, off in this other kind of place in a different facility like this. I know that they had a PT working there, and I went there one time to consult with them about something, and then that was it. So it was not required. I really didn't learn anything about rehab, except that I just knew that there was a person that did it.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, I think even a lot of the vet schools that are having rehab departments, it's still not part of their core rotation for the 4th year vet students.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully that's changing soon, right?
Well, definitely UF, they do that.
It's such a growing field now, and I think obviously the more people that become board certified, the more mainstream it'll become in veterinary, and hopefully they'll be upping their vet rehab education in the university.
Yeah. I mean, the way I put it to everybody is, it doesn't matter if, there's definitely, depending on your background, there's some people that are more old school and they're like, don't give it that much credit, or whatever the case is. And I'm like, well, no matter if you support it or not, your patients are going there. So you should know what they're doing. And it doesn't hurt to at least know.
Yeah. So when you're talking about the rotations, so like somebody who is there at the animal medical center and they're doing a surgical residency, they then also have to do exactly the same. So that surgical residency student comes and spends some time with you, right?
Oh man, someday I dream of a day where that will be required, but that's actually the surgery residents and the neurology residents, they should be required, but they are not required to come spend time with us. So if they do spend time with us, it's on their very scant free time, days off, and hope that we'll get there someday. But yeah, that's right now. It's pretty much we have just the interns that spend time with us sometimes.
Okay. Yeah. So when you were working there, was most of your cases through internal referrals, or were you getting referrals from other practices to the rehab department?
It was a balance. So we had a lot from the community. I mean, I would say maybe 75% were from outside. A lot of owners just hear about it now. I mean, a lot of owners are just they do a little research, or maybe they come for acupuncture. They want alternative medicine, and we end up being able to offer them even more. And so, but yeah, I would say maybe 30% or so were internal referrals too.
And if you think about your veterinary colleagues, so the people that you studied with, how open are they to veterinary rehabilitation and referring? So Leilani and I did a podcast interview about her research on the perceptions of vets, and we're trying to work out why exactly they refer or don't refer. So I'm interested to hear your opinion on that, whether you think that vets are more likely to refer now, and what you think going forward in the future?
I think, well, I guess it depends on what you're comparing. More likely to refer now versus when. I think that the direction is definitely in the more positive direction. But I do think that it depends on where your training is. And something that I realize is that each residency, a lot of residents are trained under one mentor, and that mentor is like the prophet or the Messiah, and then you have all the little disciples, and so if you're just used to this one person, they decide that rehab is not, you don't need rehab after hemilaminectomy, for example, it's not helpful, then you can have a whole crop of brand new veterinarians that don't believe in that, or TPLO or whatever your example is. So it's just so variable, I can say, and it's just a factor of your experiences. So if you worked in a place where you had that exposure to rehab and that positive impact, that positive impression, that changes the entire course of your career in terms of how you look at things. Or sometimes it's about just having one patient, where we had some GPs that refer to us, they get some good results, they hear good things, and they, it doesn't matter if they're young or old. I do think that GPs maybe in some ways can be a little more open-minded in that way, because they have to be flexible by the nature of their work, and they're happy to refer cases that they don't want to deal with anymore.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of rehab cases. What are you going to? You can only do so much in GP. Yeah, I think it's highly variable, but it is moving in the right direction. And that's, again, what motivated me to be like, this is so important that we get the word out there, because so many people have no idea still.
Yeah, the education is so important. We're really encouraging vet rehabbers to go out there and educate and be out there talking about, the value that we can add.
Yeah.
So you've made quite a geographical move. So I know a little bit about the United States, but I do know like New York is like all the way up there, and then you've moved all the way down there to Florida. It's quite a big move. Where are you originally from? So where were you born?
California.
Okay.
So there.
Wow. So you just moved all over the place.
Yeah.
So the move to Florida was obviously because of the position, or was that a plan that you wanted to live in Florida?
Definitely not a plan. I actually don't know very much about Florida, but we are figuring it out as we go along. But I will say that veterinary academic rehab positions are few and far between. And so, I'm actually, it's actually not a bad place. This is a nice town, and it's interesting town. It's got a lot of flavor to it. But yeah, there's not a lot of different places, and we kind of lucked out in finding something that worked for everybody. And it is a big change to the big city, but no time like coronavirus time to leave the city. So
did you move basically during coronavirus?
Yes, yeah. I mean, it was not at the height of things, but we're still in it. I mean, it's still affecting everyone, and it's nice to be someplace where things are affordable too.
Yeah. And do you have any plans for any research that you're wanting to do? Or are you just sort of seeing how it goes?
I mean, I have half-baked plans, and then I have future plans. So I'm working on getting my toe grip study published, where I looked at the effect of toe grips on weight bearing after TPLO. So excited to get that one done. I just added some more patients and have to reconfigure the data. And then there's a systematic review on rehab for cranial cruciate ligament rupture that I'm also working on as well. So those are two exciting things. And then I've got some ideas as far as assistive devices in the future. I'd like to do research in that.
Awesome. So I think you'll probably be interested. So at the Vet Rehab Summit, I hope that you'll head over and come to our discussion room on research. So on the day, we have 4 different discussion rooms. And one of them is basically talking about research. And what we're really trying to do is get a working group together where we can sort of facilitate clinical research. And so instead of, smaller little groups of people or one clinic doing some research, we actually get together with people all over the world. And so instead of having smaller sample sizes, we can have really big sample sizes to make our research a little bit more relevant, because we know that getting funding for a lot of our research is tricky. So we thought that we would try and get this group together. So we'd love it if you can be there to attend that discussion room. I think it'll be something you'd be interested in.
Oh, yes, definitely. That sounds great. Yeah. Multi-center studies. I know there's a few of them, but they're not easy to get.
And so with all the studying that you're doing and working that you do you have time to do anything, any hobbies or anything for yourself?
I think I have a philosophy that every dog needs a job and every human needs a craft. So I'm a big crafter, and I think that that's part of, especially during COVID, having something that is not a computer, not a screen, tactile to do. So I have actually a website where I'm selling my crafts called drglittersparkle.com.
Okay, awesome. So what kind of crafts?
Well, right now it's masks, because that's kind of what inspired all of this. But actually, I make candles, and I do diffusers, and actually repurposed. I take like gin bottles and repurpose them into hand soap dispensers and things like that.
Wow. So for the listeners, if you want to go and check out that website, we'll put the URL in the description notes. So awesome. That's amazing. So that takes a lot of time doing crafts. I mean, doing something like that, repurposing a gin bottle.
I mean, you just have to drink the gin first.
Okay.
That takes a little more time. It's actually, I picked crafts that didn't take too much time. Like those are like short-term projects. So you can have you can have a sense of fulfillment in a quick amount of time.
Oh, that's awesome. So if you could give one piece of advice to somebody who is going to do their certificate, so it's certification to be a diplomat, what advice would you give them?
What advice? I think that one of the key things would be I think it's important to make sure that your heart is in the right place, and then you have the right motivation. And so I think that right now we're at a stage where, there's a lot of private practices, for example, that would hire me regardless of my background. If I had a CCRT, CCRP alone, I think that they would be perfectly happy with hiring me. And I think that there's so many job opportunities out there for that. If you want to just see patients in practice, like I mean, I don't know if you would be up for the amount of investment and work that it requires, but if you want something more to your career than seeing patients, and to be part of educational things, to do research, I think that there's a special reward for it there. Because I don't think it's like this huge jump monetarily where then you're just going to make so much money and then life is so easy. I don't think it's one of those things. I think it's more about what do you want to do with this path. And that being said, if you just have a lust for learning and you just want to just learn and be, just know a lot about something really well, then if that's enough for you, then that's great. But it is a lot of work. But for me, it is key to where I want it to be. So I've never questioned it.
Awesome, Jen. Jen, thank you so much for your time. It's been so lovely chatting to you. And thanks for always sharing all your knowledge. We really appreciate you every time you share your knowledge with us and lecture for us.
Thank you. Happy to. I'm glad you guys want to listen.
Awesome, Jen. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the subscribe button so you get notified every time I load a new podcast. And please, if you get a moment, head over to Stitcher or iTunes and leave me a review. It's a really lonely job being a podcaster, and so the only time I get to hear from you or know that you're out there is when I get a review. And know that I read every single one of your reviews. So to those of you that have left reviews, I want to say a very, very big thank you. Every time we get a review, it really helps to get the Veterinary Rehabilitation podcast out there to all the vet rehabbers all over the world. All right, vet rehabbers, so if you are looking for more continuing education in the field of veterinary rehabilitation, head over to onlinepettalk.com. Go be awesome, guys.